Crystal Tower Information Whiskey 2153 Zulu, wind 060 at 5.
076 Mike Juliet, this is departure radar contact.
Hazardous weather information from Minnesota available on flight service frequency.
You've dialed in the Flying Midwest podcast, connecting aviators from across America's heartland, sharing news, information, and events from around the region.
Calling Nancy 53 on over tower, roger, turn left heading 070, runway 9er, clear for takeoff.
Sit back, relax, and join our crew for some hangar talk as we discuss a wide variety of regional aviation topics.
Archer 71143, flying 5, runway 28 left, quick takeoff, left hand southwest.
And now, from our home at the Anoka County Blaine Airport, our checklist is complete, and we're ready for departure for another episode of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Contact departure, have your flight.
What is going on, everyone? Jim here with the Flying Midwest Podcast. So happy you're able to join us. On this episode, we're joined by AOPA's Regional Manager for the Great Lakes region, Kyle Lewis. He talks to us about the advocacy done by AOPA, what's going on in our region, and what we can expect from AOPA in the future. And as always, news, information, and events from around the region, with some friendly hangar talk along the way. So strap in, and let's take off into this episode of the Fly Midwest Podcast.
What's up, guys?
Hello, Trevor. What the hell was that?
Oh, Maddie keeps on saying how tired she is.
Ill-timed. Yeah, I warned you.
You
Hi,
were
Trevor.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, for all you listening out in podcast land, we're doing this a little bit later than we normally do, so bear with us if this is a really fun and exciting and choppy introduction segment.
Well, you know why that is, right?
Because we're tired? Is this because you were flying for like 17 hours today? It wasn't maybe that many, but it was a lot.
It was a lot. Lost 100 miles an hour because our airplane is calibrated miles an hour, not knots.
Well, you sent that message earlier today saying you're going 150 miles an hour, right?
Yeah, I was going 150 miles an hour. And then I turned around and I was
turned around.
50.
See, when you sent that, I'm like, oh, there can only be but one outcome to this. He eventually has to come back.
Yeah.
So brag all you want right now, buddy, because I know what happens on the flip side of this.
It's the fastest this 150 has ever gone.
But probably not the
Nice.
slowest.
No, I've made it go slower. So it took me 2.5 hours to get to where I was going, and it took me whatever the balance of 8.2 hours is to come back.
It's
Wow.
too late for any of us to try to do math, but someone in podcast land just did it and went, God, what a bunch of idiots. That was super easy math.
I did a 1.6 today. That was literally it. It was pretty boring. Actually, it wasn't boring. It was with one of my favorite students. So
It was boring.
no, he's almost just solo. I'm excited. He's the last one of my 9 original, because I got to keep 4 that needs to solo, and he's like basically there. I'm
There you go.
excited. I'm really happy.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Is there any active aviation for you, Jim?
No.
Not even
Anyways.
reading books?
Steady?
I've been doing some studying.
Well, then, isn't that not an active aviation?
I think I got like an hour and some change in, like 2 weeks ago. So not much active aviation for me, mostly on account of my family having the Rona. And I have escaped it once again.
Nice.
I have apologized on that other little podcast I do because the production schedule for both of these podcasts is screwed right now. As far as me getting things out on the days I want to get them out. So everyone listening to this podcast, I'm sorry that the timing is off because I want to release these on Mondays and it isn't working the way I want it to. So
Jim's slacking, that's why.
a little bit.
What's in the episode today?
So I fibbed to everyone, not intentionally. It was more like a change of plan. In our last episode, we talked at the end of that episode about bringing on John Zimmerman for Sporties. Well, there's a change of plans. We haven't actually got a chance to interview him yet, but we did get a chance to interview one Mr. Kyle Lewis with AOPA. He is the Great Lakes Regional Manager. I'm really tempted to say assistant to the regional manager. Like
Oh
the
my God.
office.
I wasn't going to say it, but now you have to, because that's so funny.
Well, I just did. So we're going to have 2 episodes with him, one now and one later. The first episode being more of a update on what AOPA is doing in the region and nationally on a lot of different topics that affect pilots like us. So we'll talk to him in a little bit.
I'm hyped.
Me too. It was a really good conversation. So I'm excited for everyone to listen to that and hear what AOPA is up to and what your dues go towards.
Not to spoil anything, it's very impressive.
And it was a really good time. He's a good guy. So
I learned a lot.
Well, before we learn some more, do we have any news or events that we need to jump to?
Gosh, do we?
I think the first thing we can talk about is, we were going to talk about it as we chit-chatted, but this is a good segue into it. The weather here in Minnesota and probably parts of the Midwest kind of sucked last week.
Would you say it's frightful?
The weather outside was frightful, yes, under that effect. So with that, let's jump over to some news from the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, where the high winds and the direction the winds were coming from caused MSP to have to use, quote-unquote, a unusual runway for them. And hundreds of flight operations were actually canceled in the area. In fact, nearly 400 flights were canceled on Wednesday morning as a winter storm swept across the state. This caused the tower to have to shift its traffic operations from the two more common parallel runways to
Runway 4, which was really strange because I was out at Fort Snelling and watching all the departures of all the aircraft shaking the roof.
What's unusual about it, 13 times in total in all of 2022 did they use that crosswind runway, runway 422.
The question that I have, though,
What's that?
do those times that used runway 422 include the times that Delta took off using the A350 or the 777? They used to use it for the 74s when they took off for the
Sure.
Narita runs and Amsterdam and whatnot.
Did you say burrito runs?
I want to go on a burrito run.
No, I didn't say burrito runs.
Narita. Oh, I just wanted to hear. I just wanted to hear
Japan.
burrito.
Got food on the brain tonight.
That makes way more sense than what I was thinking. Go ahead, Trevor.
But I mean, does 422 really do those times that they've used it for mass amount of aircraft include the departures for Delta?
Well, unfortunately, this article doesn't tell me that. So, I don't know. If anyone's listening that has an answer, shoot us a message and we'll talk about it on our next episode. How about that?
That sounds like a good time.
That's fair.
So staying in the Twin Cities, you guys remember the Super Bowl and the
No.
unidentified flying object over Lake Huron? Well, apparently Minnesota's 148th Fighter Wing, the F-16s that were based out of Duluth, intercepted this unidentified flying object over Lake Huron as part of a federal mission. They originated from, even though they're from Duluth, they departed from Madison, Wisconsin to intercept. Pentagon officials say that the object was shot down over Lake Huron after it was first detected over Montana Saturday evening. It was originally thought to be an anomaly. Radar then detected the object again over the peninsula of Michigan just before the jets shot it down. So kind of where it was today,
Well, I'm glad it wasn't you.
over UP, Michigan. I wasn't that high, though. Kudos to the 148th, even though it did take 2 missiles to take it down.
We don't talk about that.
Performance anxiety.
Okay.
I feel like we don't talk about Nebraska very much.
Well, let's have at it.
All right. So this week in Nebraska, the U.S. Senator from Nebraska recently offered bipartisan legislation to bolster the nation's aviation and aerospace workforce pipelines. So she said that airports and aviation partners across Nebraska are having trouble finding mechanics and other technical maintenance staff that they so desperately need. And this bill, she noted, will expand FAA workforce grants and, quote, help more people access the training they need to build a strong career in aviation. I think we all know that the maintenance side of things is drastically underappreciated, understaffed, etc. So this is great news, and I hope this does go through. The Aviation Workforce Opportunity Recruiting, Knowledge, and Supply Act, also known as the Aviation Works Act, was sponsored on February 9th by U.S. Senator Mark Kelly, with Senator Fisher signing on as the lead original co-sponsor. So, of course, everything has to have a fun acronym. This time it's WORKS. That's exciting. So if this is enacted, this bill would extend the existing federal aviation workforce development programs and provide grants to develop aviation manufacturing and the supplier workforce, according to the text of the bill. This legislation will actually quadruple funding from the current $5 million to $20 million for the Aviation Workforce Development Program, which currently supports competitive grants to strengthen this pipeline for both pilots and maintenance technicians. It would also establish 2 additional grant programs, an aviation manufacturing workforce development program to support aviation manufacturers and institutions of higher education in expanding skills training and education opportunities, and also a sector-based grant program that will create partnerships between employers, labor unions, institutions of higher education, and other community stakeholders to better connect workers with training and employers. Any questions?
I don't think so. Thank you, though.
I don't know why I asked that. Gosh.
I don't know, but it's staying in the
student mode.
podcast.
Damn it.
This next article we have is probably right up Brian Turner's alley, and this is a really good excuse to bring him up in our podcast for this episode so we can get the check mark accomplished for mentioning his name. This actually, when I first saw it, reminded me of something I might actually see on his channel, but this is a legit story. In Illinois, General Aviation Airport is unveiling a new brewery, and they're saying it's the first beer brewed in a General Aviation Airport called the Wheels Up IPA at Southern Illinois Airport, KMDH, which is just north of Carbondale, Illinois. That airport is actually one of the busiest airports in Illinois after Chicago O'Hare and Midway. The owner of the bar actually has another location. They're cyclists by heart, but as the planning process started for a new terminal at the airport, they began working in development with a group to open a brewery at that location. It was delayed by the pandemic, but finally was opened in May of 2022. Aviators can sample a variety of cocktails and craft brews, and there's also options for lodging and to explore the region, because this should be an overnight trip, not one where you come and grab a beer and then head back home. The author of this article from Flying Magazine, Amy Wilder, is smart to put a section in the very bottom of this article, a reminder for responsible aviators about FAR 91.17, about flying and being under the influence of alcohol. At any rate, it does seem like a really cool thing to go check out. It's right at the airport, so if people want to go hang out, it's also a place where there's student pilots training all the time, so people can hang out there, watch airplanes all day long, have a cool, refreshing adult beverage, spend the night, and then once the proper amount of time has gone by, then you can fly back home. So kind of a cool concept.
Oh, yeah. I think Flight Co. Brewery out in Colorado, I think they're a popular spot. I know they're not on, I don't think they're on the airport, but they're very close. I know they're a popular spot for get-togethers for aviators and stuff. It's good that there's somewhere that people in the little bit north can go.
There you go.
Very.
So now we got the news out of the way. What do we have for events, Jim?
I have all kinds of events.
Oh, yeah.
Care to share?
I do, actually. On March 9th of 2023 at 11:30 a.m., join the Iowa Business and Aviation Association for their first quarterly luncheon of the new year. The event will be held at the Des Moines Airport, Kilo Delta Sierra Mike. They'll be joined by Chris Axtell from Des Moines Air Traffic Control, who will be presenting great information and answering your questions. This event will be here soon, so to get more information or to register, visit www.iowabusinessaviation.org/events. Next up, on Saturday, March 11th from 8:30 a.m. till 10:30 a.m., join the Vintage Aircraft Association at the Sky King Airport, Identifier 3 India 3, which is just north of Terre Haute, Indiana. They'll be hosting their first of several P-Factor days for the year. This is a bi-monthly pancake breakfast fly-in and will be held rain or shine. Join them for good food and some great hangar flying. More information on their Facebook page, which is facebook.com/BAA Chapter 41. Next up, we swing down to the Harlan Airport in Harlan, Iowa, where on Saturday, March 18th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., they'll have a chili and soup fly-in. You'll be able to enjoy a sampling of select homemade soups and chilies at this fun fly-in event. The event is put on by 8 Ball Aviation Flying Club. For more information on this event, you can check out their Facebook page, facebook.com/hnr.harlan.ia. Up next, Saturday, March 25th from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m., join the Nebraska chapter of the Antique Airplane Association for their first of several monthly burger feeds lasting from March through October through 2023. The event is held at the Hastings Municipal Airport in Hastings, Nebraska. And finally, mark your calendars now as National Stoll comes to Minnesota this summer. They will be at the Isle, Minnesota Airport, identifier Mike Yankee 72, from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, July 7th through the 8th of 2023. There'll be a free concert on Friday night, as well as a pancake breakfast fly-in and drive-in on Sunday morning, and camping will be available on site. For more information, you can check out the National Stoll's website, which is nationalstoll.com/2023 season schedule. You're welcome.
Happy to be of service, Jim.
Yeah.
So today we're joined by Kyle Lewis, who is the Great Lakes Regional Manager for the AOPA. This won't be our usual interview format, as we're going to use this time to actually get the scoop on all the things that the AOPA has been working on and that's going on in and around our region.
Not only that, he'll talk about a couple of national level topics as well. The unleaded fuel discussion has been a big topic around the nation. So he'll touch on that a little bit, as well as talk about some events that AOPA is going on. So let's bring on Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
So Kyle, thank you so much for joining us on these 2 episodes of the Flying Midwest podcast. Really happy to have you here.
Happy to be here. I appreciate you accepting my offer to be on your podcast.
Hey, it doesn't happen too often, so it's pretty exciting.
Don't tell people that, Maddie. We're highly popular and everyone should ask to be on the podcast. We're totally cool with it. Should we jump into these fast 5 questions?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Kyle, so I think you know the drill. We ask you a question. You give us your quick gut response to what that question is.
Okay.
So, question number 1. What is your personal favorite airport?
Personal favorite airport. First flight, North Carolina.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I would love to get there someday.
I have a friend who has flown in there, and I'm like, oh, I want to go. I want to see.
So, question number 2. In your opinion, who is the best lead character in an aviation movie? If you could pick any aviation movie, your best lead character, who would you pick?
Waldo Pepper, from the Great Waldo Pepper.
It's a new one.
I don't know that I know that one.
You ever see the Great Waldo Pepper, the Barnstormer?
I don't think
I saw the plane at Oshkosh.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Great movie.
This has happened before where we asked someone their favorite aviation movie and I'd never heard of it and I went and watched it and they're like, this is a good movie. So I will add that to the list, sir. I appreciate your
Will do.
I appreciate your addition to my movies to watch. Question number 3. Favorite air show or fly-in venue?
I will have to say, and this is a little work related, I didn't even know it existed until my time at AOPA, but the Minnesota Seaplane Pilot Association safety seminar weekend up in Brainerd.
Wow.
So it's a big seaplane fly-in.
Sure.
And it's just amazing to see all the seaplanes on the beaches. And the venue was great. They're at Madden's on East Gulf.
That's
Very
so
cool.
fun. The things you don't know exist if you don't fly a seaplane.
That's exactly right.
Question number 4. Ugliest airplane you've ever seen?
Oh my gosh. This is going to take some thought.
That's why we ask the hard questions right up front. Get you warmed up.
You know, ugliest air. If you get a helicopter, because all helicopters are ugly.
Do you have one specific helicopter?
I think we can allow it. Okay, ugliest aircraft you've ever seen. How about that?
Any helicopter, your choice.
Any helicopter.
Wait. What about, I'm going to get very specific here. The Army's pick for their new vertical takeoff and landing helicopter, Sikorsky.
Oh, yeah, that
rumor
thing.
Oh,
That
the
thing is
non-Osprey?
god-awful.
The not Osprey.
The non-Osprey.
non-Osprey,
Yeah,
yes.
let's go with that. Let's go with tilt rotor, because that's just. I'll just go there. It's not an airplane. It's not a helicopter.
It defies logic.
Frankenstein
It's confused.
thing. That's exactly right.
That's a great answer. That's my favorite answer I think we've had in a long time.
Is this the Hate on Helicopters podcast now?
No, it's not. I enjoy watching helicopters because I think they're, a modern engineering marvel, but, they just are what they are.
I gotta agree with you on the tilt rotors, though. Not a fan of those.
Yeah.
What do I know? All right, last question. If you could meet and have a conversation with any aviator, dead or alive, who would it be?
Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes. I don't think we've heard that one before. Have we?
No, we have not.
No, I'd like to know, what other ideas he had, other than what was actually created. Because, whatever is behind what we saw would be very interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. Let's go find him.
Go back in
Yeah,
time.
where's
Just go
he? Yeah.
dig him up. It doesn't work that way. All right. Well, Kyle, thanks for playing along with our fast 5 questions here. Are you ready for the real interview?
Let's go with the real interview.
The questions got easier, I think, after the fast 5 when we put you on the spot. So for those not familiar, what is the role of the regional manager with AOPA?
So this job, the regional manager job, it's kind of, you are AOPA in the region. You you get really tied in with state aviation associations. You get tied in with state airport associations. So those are your airport managers. You spend a lot of time at state houses, lobbying, on behalf of general aviation. That was something that was new to me. And after I got hired, I said, hey, do I go to training to be a lobbyist? And the quick answer was either you have it or you don't. There really is no training for that. So I guess I'm doing okay because I'm still here.
Yeah, you're still there.
I'm still here. There's been some interesting, I won't call them fights. It's more, everything's a conversation. Yeah. It's politics. Politics is, left or right, down the middle. It's kind of a sport when it comes down to it. There's a lot of egos involved on both sides. You kind of just have to know how to read people, I think, is the important part, and kind of look 2 or 3 steps ahead onto what you want the end game to be. And then you kind of plot a strategy from there. And I don't do it by myself. We have a whole team in Frederick at headquarters, and also in D.C. We also have an office in Washington, D.C., with a lot of resources to rely upon. So it's not just me, but I enjoy that part of it. It's challenging sometimes. I call it herding cats because you don't do anything legislatively alone. And having good state pilot associations or state aviation associations with you, or you're supporting them, that's kind of a two-way street. That's how you get things done. And believe it or not, politics at the state level, it's a little more relaxed in some ways. It's more accessible for sure. Because all of these state legislatures, they have day jobs, right? They're farmers, they're doctors, some are attorneys, they're teachers.
Sure.
And they truly care about their community and they care about their state. So they are more than willing to listen to you if something is bad or if it's good. So I will give them credit on any issue I've worked in the last 6 years. I've never had a door closed on me. I'll say that from a state representative. Then we also get heavily involved in airport advocacy, which is something that other associations really don't do as detailed as what we do. We work issues like, Burke Lakefront is a new one that's popped up for me. The mayor, he's a new mayor, young mayor, doesn't know a whole lot about aviation or airports. He wants to close that airport and put a city park there, as a lakefront revitalization program.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, very familiar. Very familiar. So we've been working, and I'll say this, a lot of what AOPA does is not, in the spotlight. And I think that's something we can do better. But at the same time, I think working behind the scenes and making those connections and having those conversations does move the needle more so than showboating or taking the spotlight. Because we work with local groups, local pilot associations. We stand them up so their voices are heard. So it's good to know that AOPA does have that credibility. So that's really where AOPA is very, very, I'll say good. Good's not the best word, but it's a lot of leverage.
It's very effective.
Well, it is very effective.
You look at the aviation fuel controversy. I mean, you look at California, going from, leadless fuel. And now you're looking at, at least at my local airport, we're looking at, they're reducing the number of FBOs that are able to sell fuel to 3, and we've got like 6 or 7 FBOs on the field.
Right.
So you get monopolizing and things like that. And you're right, it's all a political game. So that's actually kind of interesting that you guys are granular, but also big picture.
Yeah, we have to be big picture because what's happening in California in Santa Clara County, again, I'm not schooled up on all the details. It's not my region, but I, hear the conversations around it. It's a huge safety issue. That's really where we're trying to make headway with the FAA. Yes, they're bringing in the 94 UL to support the flight training fleet and some transit aircraft, but at the end of the day, it's a safety issue. 100 low lead avgas needs to be made available at that airport. We feel they're not meeting their grant obligations, their grant assurances. Whether they want to close the airport or not, it's a safety issue, bottom line. And the pilots there, we're working with them on a group basis out there at Reed Hillview. Bill Dunn. Don't know if you know that name or not, but he was a former AOP Vice President of Airports and State Advocacy for a long, long time. Bill still works with AOPA on a contract basis, and he's working the rebuilding issue every day, along with East Hampton in New York, with that airport closure / recategorizing to a private use airport, which has seen some issues there. If these airports can get away with it, and they see they can get away with it, we don't want that tidal wave of airports across the nation saying, well, we can just turn off the pumps and close the airport. There's a couple airports in Wisconsin that we're monitoring pretty closely around the Madison area. Yeah, there's been a lot of heat around Middleton, Maury Field, which is just right outside of Madison. It's kind of a unique situation there. It's not the airport sponsor, which an airport sponsor is the local unit of government that kind of signs the bottom line for the grants for the airport. This is a neighboring town. It's a small township called the town of Middleton, so don't be confused with the city of, town of. The town of Middleton has a town administrator who is totally against the airport, and she has been making a lot of noise in recent years, whether it's noise complaints, land compatibility arguments, and now she's on the bandwagon with the lead. And the town of Middleton has commissioned 2 or 3 studies on lead, which nothing has been found. But we're not here to argue the science, because we as an industry know that a little bit of lead is not okay. We want to make that safe transition to an unleaded fuel. We wanted that for a long time. It's just not a simple, easy thing to do, given the complexities of, the refineries, the blenders, the logistics of getting it to an airport, all of the moving parts at the airport, fuel trucks, fuel hoses, the fuel tanks, all the compatibility there. So it's truly an industry problem. It's not just blend some fuel and dump it in an airplane, right? There's a lot of moving parts to that.
Well, I think one of the biggest things you brought up, the safety aspect. I was doing some research on my airplane, and it's got the AOPA STC. Right. What they don't tell you it's great, yada, yada, yada. Well, what does AOPA and MoGas, what's the trade-off? Yeah, you get cheaper gas. There's a trade-off. In little Cessna 150s like what I got, you end up with carb ice a lot earlier than what you would with 100 low lead. It's like, well, shoot, I didn't know that. It wasn't until I started doing research on this, I'm like, there is a big issue. Yeah, it's a great compromise, but people don't know the full ins and outs of everything that's going to play into that decision.
It's not an easy thing to understand, and it's not easy to explain. And even autogas, there's ethanol, right, which has its own bad properties on rubber and gaskets and everything else. So this is not an easy problem to solve, but we all know that GAMI, they do have that STC. Their process now is finding a blender to make their fuel. And these blenders want to see more testing, right? They've satisfied the FAA STC process, but now the blenders want testing. And there's some other fuel candidates up and coming, Swift Fuels. Christy Acosta, he's saying midsummer 2023. So this year, he may have an STC for Swift's 100 unleaded fuel. And they also blend fuel. That's a little bit of a difference between GAMI and Swift is, yes, Swift is a research company, but they also blend fuel at their plant there in Lafayette, Indiana. And they're shipping 94 UL every day. So that's the STC process. And the STC process is kind of privately held, right? It's not subject to FOIA. Now, PAFI, which is the Piston Aviation Fuel Initiative that the FAA is the FAA track, that is more of a transparent process. So all of these blends, which may be, held close by GAMI and Swift, would be under public scrutiny, open to public record request, all their testing would be available. So there's some financial issues there. But there are still 2 fuels in the PAFI process with FAA, and that's been ongoing for 12, 15 years. So I truly believe just, hearing the conversations and being around it, obviously the EPA has the endangerment finding. My personal feeling is in the next 2 to 4 years, we will have a fuel available, and that will be available on the market, widespread. So that's at least the hope.
Very interesting.
Yeah. I didn't know there were several in the works. That's interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely more than GAMI. Even though GAMI is the first to get the STC, there's others to follow. Now, what the market will bear as far as how many fuels will be on the market, that's an industry, whatever it can handle. If there's 2 fuels, it's going to be the best one that's marketed, the best one that's readily available. Shipping it is going to be a huge logistical thing. depending on where it's blended. Right now, avgas is only blended on the East Coast and West Coast. There are some differences in the East Coast and West Coast blend of avgas. I think the East Coast blend has 2 grams of lead per gallon. The West Coast blend only has 1 or 1.5 grams per gallon. Yeah, and it's also the tetraethyl lead, not to go too doom and gloom, but the tetraethyl lead is only produced in one plant, one factory in the world, and that's Liverpool, England. And that factory is under a lot of pressure to close for environmental concerns. Aviation is really the only user of tetraethyl lead now. Now, with a new blend of fuel, it could be made right here in the United States. It could be pipelined, perhaps. Avgas cannot be pipelined because of the lead. So avgas does have its cons in the infrastructure world. So,
sure.
Now, Game's fuel is what they call fungible. Very fun word to say, fungible, which means that it can be mixed with avgas. You can mix it with avgas. But then, obviously, at that point, it becomes a leaded fuel. Right.
Sure.
So, but at least the theory is, well, if you have avgas for one airport and the other has the GAMI fuel or XYZ fuel, you can mix it with the avgas with no issues. Personally, I've mixed 94 UL with avgas in my airplane, and it's been just fine.
Well, I suppose there's a whole other issue involving just the tanks at the airports themselves.
We'll see how the FAA determines, will they require airports to clean their tanks, go through a cleaning process and then reuse the current tanks? Will there need to be new tanks? There's a lot of questions at the airport operator level as well.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
I mean, a lot of those tanks have been underground for generations.
Yeah.
I mean, what else are you going to dig up then at that point?
Right, exactly. So the hope is, this will be a drop-in, that's the term, drop-in replacement for 100 low lead. Whichever fuel that is, that's the end goal. This isn't a problem industry needs to resolve.
From an aircraft owner perspective, what is the biggest takeaway that an aircraft owner should be looking at right now?
The biggest takeaway is, most pilots, and this is me putting my pilot hat on, I pull up to a gas tank, I just want to know there's gas available that I can put in my airplane. And that it's at a price point that's not outrageous.
Right.
That's what pilots, that's what our membership cares about. I'm not sure some do. This is a very general statement. I don't think they really care about the politics behind it. They just want to know that AOPA is working on a solution that's going to be a replacement for 100 low lead, and it's not going to cost them an arm and a leg to put it in their airplane. There is an expectation that a new fuel may cost a little more at the pump. It might be like that bell curve, right? There might be an initial cost that's a little higher, and then it could, trim itself down as it becomes more available. But what we've seen from GAMI and even Swift is saying the same thing, that these fuels are cleaner. They run cleaner than avgas, which means maybe longer TPO periods on engines. Spark plugs. Who has not had a foul spark plug because you might not leave your power back on the ground and you foul spark plug, and maybe you can burn the lead off, maybe not, maybe you got to throw it away and drop $50 on your spark plug.
Sure.
Geared engines, there's still a lot of geared engines out there. Lead builds up in the gearboxes, lead builds up in the oil tank, lead builds up everywhere. So when lead goes away, those problems are to go away. So you might be a trade-off. It might not be that dollar per dollar, but in the long term, as you break out the expense of aircraft ownership, you may save a little bit on the maintenance side. To me, that's a pretty big deal as well, saving on the maintenance side, because that cost right now is not going down at all.
No.
Oh, definitely. If I could save money at the back end, the maintenance side of things,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm already paying $7.70 a gallon
Right.
at my local airport. So
Awful.
Did you say 770? Holy cow. All right, sorry.
I think it
carry
went
on.
down 5 cents. I think this past weekend it was $7.65. There's still technically 4 out of 6 suppliers for fuel, but Metropolitan Airport Commission, they're limiting who's selling fuel.
Yeah.
They were doing their contracts and things like that. So, I mean,
Ugh.
can you say price gouging?
That's a topic we could talk about for hours upon hours. But,
Oh yeah, we could burn some brain cells on that.
yeah. But the unleaded fuel, it is a top bar priority for AOPA in 2023. There may be some pathways to some fuel issues with FAA reauthorization that we're working on now.
So you mentioned reauthorization. Let's talk about that for just a minute. So my understanding is the representative who is in charge of that committee is a general aviation pilot himself.
So Representative Stan Graves out of Missouri is now the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee Chairman, and he is a GA pilot. He flies a Texan at Oshkosh.
Nice.
He
Cool.
Yeah, he's a really neat guy. I've enjoyed chatting with him the few times I've met him, and I know he is really trying to make a difference for general aviation in this FAA reauthorization package. And I know he's working with all the industry groups on certain things, whether it's airport related, aviation related in general, funding. There's a lot of things on the funding side with the FAA that need fixed. There hasn't been an upgrade to the AIP funding in over 20 years.
Really?
Airport, yeah. If you're an airport at Nipias Airport, which is in the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, there's about 3,300 airports in the United States that receive federal grant dollars. If you're a general aviation airport, which means you don't have commercial service or cargo service, you get entitlement funding every year of $150,000. You can use it for a small project, or you can bank that money, and you can hold that money back for 4 years, and you have $600K to put towards a large-scale project like a runway rehabilitation, taxiway, whatever eligible project you have. So, obviously, $150,000 does not go very far. Just to engineer a project, my home airport here in Ohio, they're adding on to a parking lot, not airplane parking lot, a vehicle parking lot. With some grant dollars, and just the engineering is going to run $60,000 to $70,000. Things are not getting cheaper, so the AIP funding needs to kind of bump up and match that. We're looking at hopefully some legislation to change that, other funding and eligibility requirements on certain things. So that should be introduced. We're hoping sometime next month or April, and for it to be voted on by September, October is kind of the time frame that they're looking at. Yeah, so that's the federal stuff, which I'm not involved in on a daily basis, but obviously we do get briefed on it, and when so called, we do help out.
Sure.
We need people like you in places like those.
So from here, we're to talk about some of the regional things going on with AOPA, and more specifically, your role within that, Kyle. So AOPA just had a fly-in in Arizona?
We did. Actually, I just returned from Phoenix yesterday. Huge event. And this is a little bit different format than we've done our fly-ins in the past. We actually partnered with the city of Buckeye on their airfare, the Buckeye Airfare.
Okay.
Full-blown air show. They had like a 12-act air show. And then we also had our fly-in in conjunction with that. Now, there are challenges with having a fly-in and an air show, just because of the waivered airspace, and they had air show practice times and
Sure.
and all of that. But this was a lot of planning. We worked with the city of Buckeye probably, I know, at least a year in planning this. About a year ago, I was asked internally to help out with our events and outreach staff with our airside operations, because at all of our fly-ins, AOPA staff members handle all the aircraft movements, the aircraft camping, the parking, the volunteer marshalers.
Okay.
It's kind of like a little mini air venture. So Tom Zecca, who actually manages our pilot information center, he was in that role for, 15 or 16 years. He did our big expos in Palm Springs, all of our fly-ins. He coordinated all of the air side on that. And just in the last year, I've kind of taken over that role internally with AOPA. So I guess I have a very trusting face. I'm not sure. So for Buckeye, that was my first show where I was kind of team lead on our air side, and we had 500 airplanes.
Wow.
Come in from the weekend. Yeah, and Friday, I was totally blown away. Friday, the winds were like 28 knot, gusting up to 28 on a crosswind, and they only have a single runway at Buckeye, and we had 120 airplanes show up that day.
Wow.
Wow.
I was totally impressed. It was like, oh man, this will be a slow day. Nobody's going to show up. And we put 120 airplanes on the airport that day.
That's
We
awesome.
actually contracted with some retired ATC folks that had an advisory tower. So they treated the airport like it had a control tower. We have special arrival procedures. If you've ever been to one of our fly-ins, we kind of have a note on the, a routing to fly into the airport for mitigation on traffic. Had the same thing at Buckeye. It worked out very well. The city of Buckeye just gave us the numbers, I think yesterday or today, 38,000, I think, for the weekend as far as attendees. And then we had 500 airplanes. 2, 3, 4 people came in the airplanes. each time. Campers, we had to close registration on camping because we literally ran out of room
Wow.
for
wow.
overnight aircraft camping. Our seminars were packed. Very, very good show for this kind of blended style that we're moving to, because again, it goes back to membership and aviation and bringing people into aviation. If we're just going to our members, and saying, "Hey, come fly into XYZ airport," we're just going to get our members.
Sure.
So why not go to a community event at an airport and bring the AOPA flavor to that? But they've really taken the event to the next level, and maybe some plans in the works to revisit it and go back to it next year and make it a repeat thing.
I can't imagine the positive economic impact that had.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
Boy, it's got to be huge.
It was a really neat experience, and I was glad to be a part of that. So our events going forward, this year, we're looking at a showcase in Frederick, an aviator showcase, which is an exhibit hall and maybe a few seminars and things like that. Not necessarily a full-blown fly-in weekend. I think it's in September. I don't know the exact dates yet, but we're also in conversations with other airports that have some large community, airport events for 2024, kind of like a Buckeye, maybe in the Eastern region or Midwest even. Also, we will be at Triple Tree in South Carolina.
All right.
We're bringing our AOPA Village, which will be kind of a little exhibit hall, some seminars. Luckily there, we're not doing the fly-in part because Triple Tree already does that very well.
Okay.
So we'll just be doing more of the AOPA exhibits, AOPA seminars. So those are kind of the events lined out for this year. 2024, there might be, I can't speak to any surprises, but there might be a surprise for 2024. So I'll just leave it at that.
We like surprises.
Yeah.
It's always good to have a little bit of mystery, right?
Yep. That's
Cliffhanger.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. The suspense will make people keep listening because it won't probably be accurate, but we'll tell them that we'll have an exclusive surprise from AOPA. You don't have to announce with us, but keep us in mind. But then people will keep listening. So
yeah, and maybe once plans are solidified and things are going to happen, I can definitely come back and provide some detail. So
love it. That'd be fantastic.
Oh, was it an agreement to come back?
In fairness,
Yay.
Kyle invited himself on the podcast. I don't have a problem with him inviting himself back. I mean, we're cool with it.
Oh, yeah.
I've never been on a podcast, so
Well, welcome. So some legislative initiatives that have happened in the region over the last, couple of years.
So Ohio, that's my home state. We've literally, since day one at AOPA, I think when I started, I got a phone call from Stacy Heaton, who was the Ohio Aviation Association executive director at the time. It's a very interesting thing, and I'll try not to get too far in the weeds, but basically tall structure permitting. So wind turbines, cell towers,
Okay.
Even houses or factories are being built, near airports. Generally, the state DOT has some sort of permitting process, or it's local zoning or airport zoning or something like that handles that permitting process. The FAA, believe it or not, does not issue permits for that. The FAA will do a airspace study, and they'll say either it's not a problem, it's an obstruction, or it's a hazard, right? And then they push all that to the locals and let them sort out the spaghetti mess of what needs to happen to actually get that constructed. In Ohio, they do have, it's called the Ohio Airport Protection Act. It was originally passed in the early 90s, basically when cell towers started popping up and things like that. And it's generally in line with CFR Part 77, which is the instrument approaches, and how those are designed, and all the imaginary surfaces around an airport. Well, a lot of things have changed since 1993. The state DOT, their aviation office, administers that tall structure permitting. They cannot do their job properly. Even today, they're doing a permitting process, but they don't have legal authority in certain what's considered navigable airspace. And that is basically anything above 200 feet AGL. Currently in the state of Ohio, they cannot issue a permit for that. So it's kind of like the Wild West in these little pockets of weird jurisdictional suit. And that could impact some airports. So This has literally been ongoing for 5 years, trying to update this section of Ohio Revised Code. Originally, it was thought, well, it doesn't need to go through the legislative process. It can be an administrative code rewrite, which goes to a joint committee on rulemaking, basically administrative rulemaking. Once they dug into it and realized it was very complex, which it is, they said, no, this should probably be legislated. Well, okay, so that you kind of reset the clock. You have to go back and start at ground one, get a bill sponsor, go through the legislative process, all the hearings, amendments, and go through, any opponent testimony, which there have been some, obviously. And then you're racing the clock on the session, all the priorities. So last year, we thought we had it in the state budget as an amendment to codify this. And at the last minute, literally the last minute, they kicked out all of the amendments that were in the state budget. Otherwise, the budget wouldn't have been passed in time. That was kind of a heartbreaker because it was there, it was getting ready to happen, and then it got kicked out. So then we had to start over. That resets the clock again. So early last year, about a year ago, we're pretty deep involved in, drafting the correct language. And again, there were some opponents. So a wind turbine lobby obviously fought pretty hard and kind of put up some roadblocks. And then time ran out on the session. So here we are, early 2023. In fact, today I was at the Ohio State House earlier today, meeting with some state representatives that might be interested in sponsoring that bill moving forward. And we can't do it alone. That's why we're partnering with the Aviation Association here in Ohio. But it's an interesting process. I've learned a lot. The legislative process itself is not complicated to understand because it's all spelled out. But the sausage making can be very sporty, so to speak. Yeah, but it's always good to say, hey, I flew to the state capitol to talk to you about this aviation bill.
So what else do you have going on in the Midwest region, or Great Lakes region, rather, that we haven't talked about yet?
So I mentioned, Burke Lakefront and that closure threat. That one, it's kind of been bubbling for about a year since the new mayor got elected. The mayor and the city council commissioned 2 separate studies. That's what got our attention.
Okay.
They can write news articles about, well, they want to close the airport, but until there's some action actually taken, that's what our interest is piqued. So the mayor and city council commissioned 2 separate studies. The first one, the regulatory process to close the airport. And the second, alternative land uses of airport property. Did they wait for the first one to come back? No, they didn't. They kind of commissioned them both at the same time. Interestingly enough, they could have just gone to the FAA and said, hey, what do we need to do to close this airport? Rather than waste a couple of $300,000 in taxpayer dollars, on something they could have been told by the FAA. One of the first questions the FAA will ask, and this I tell our members this whenever they come to us saying, hey, this airport might close. Well, if it's a federally funded airport and it's grant obligated, which means it's taking grant dollars, that airport, depending on the grant, is obligated for a period of time to remain open as an airport. Now, if the airport has taken grant dollars to purchase property to expand the footprint of the airport or to remove obstructions, then that airport is obligated in perpetuity, which layman's terms is forever. Yes, there are legal ways around that, but it's expensive to do to close an airport. One of the first questions the FAA will ask, how will this benefit aviation by closing this airport? Generally, that's a question that cannot be answered in a suitable fashion to the FAA. In the case of Burke Lakefront, a little bit of a difference between Chicago Megs. Megs Field was not grant obligated.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
Yeah, there was not a lot of leverage that the FAA actually had there to say, no, you can't close the airport. Even though Mayor Daley bulldozed it up in the middle of the night, probably not the best or smartest thing to do, obviously. But I think Cleveland, they're not going to do that. They realize that they can't do that. So I think after talking to folks in Cleveland, kind of reading between the lines in these studies, I've had conversations with the mayor's staff. My opinion, they're looking for some political top cover to walk away from the conversation. They realize it would be a steep uphill climb, a very expensive uphill climb to close that airport. And aside from that, it's built on a trash dump. Environmentally, there's really nothing else they could do for the property. In fact, the deed of the property says it can be one of two things: a trash dump or an airport.
Did we talk about Detroit City?
Not yet. No, we can talk about that real quick if you want.
Let's have at it.
So Detroit City, so that airport has been under closure threat for years. That was an issue way back even before I started AOPA, mid 2000s, popped up. The airport has been neglected. I don't know if you've ever been to the airport, but it's literally in the worst zip code in Detroit. It sits between 6 and 7 Mile Road, if that gives you any idea. But I tell you what, there's some great people there. We have a ASN volunteer, Yul Kenzie. He's been the heart and soul of the airport advocacy efforts at that airport. Totally impressed. The first time I met Yul, we talk, a couple times a month about what's going on at Detroit City. The new mayor at the time, Mayor Dugan, kind of the same story. Hey, this airport, it's rotting away. Let's use it for something else. Let's make that a bigger vision of land use for the city. And the airport had not taken any federal grants. In fact, their grants were going to expire fairly soon. And there were our members based there. There were community. The community loved the airport. It had been there since the 1920s, 1929, I think. It's been there a long, long time. Tuskegee Airmen have a museum there. There was Davis High School, had a flight school there for a long, long time. He was part of that community. And Yul Kenzie, along with other interested parties, tenants at the airport, they put together a local support group, the Coleman A. Young Detroit City Airport Education Association. They got a hold of city council, the two wards that the airport sat on. The city councilman came together and totally got it. It's rare when a local politician understands the value of that airport. And they pushed for it. They got the mayor. Finally, the mayor realized that, this airport's probably worth more as an airport to the city of Detroit than bulldozing it and making it a warehouse. So the last couple of years, this was all kind of during COVID, the airport did not have what's called an airport layout plan, which is an AOP, which is basically the 10-year planning document for the airport. Those are the projects the FAA is going to pay for. They came up with an airport layout plan that the state DOT would accept and the FAA would accept. And it's going to be roughly $100 million worth of investment in the next 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Huge win. A lot of work. Give a shout out to Yul Kenzie, Keith Newell, David Tarrant. They work tirelessly locally to educate everybody on this airport. They're going to install EMAS at both ends of the primary runway. They're going to extend, I think the runway, 400 or 700 feet. Now, there is kind of a concession. We're not exactly cheering about this, but the crosswind runway has the potential to become decommissioned at some point in the future. But overall, for the sustainability of that airport and the investment they're going to get, you have to make a compromise somewhere. And
sure,
it's the crosswind runway. Now, that property will be used for aeronautical development. New T hangars, maybe some new corporate hangars.
Okay.
Maybe a new FBO. I think they're going to try to have, ARFF, maybe even a training facility there. So there is some aeronautical use potential for that property down the road. So there's a lot of positive things to come out of this. AOPA, obviously, we're a membership base, but when it comes to these airport advocacy issues, it's a local fight. We will support you any way we can. I made several trips to Detroit, for early morning breakfast with city councilmen and with the city council meetings and gave the national perspective on airports. Why is it a bigger discussion than just Detroit?
Sure.
And that's why I was there. But the locals, the users of that airport, they are the ones that made the difference, and all the credit goes to them on this one.
Well, Jim, is it that time?
It's absolutely that time.
It's the time.
I feel like you might know what the question is going to be because you've listened before, but we're curious if you have an unpopular aviation opinion.
I learned to fly at a Part 141 flight school. It's pretty structured, but I had a really good instructor. And one thing they kind of pounded in my head from the beginning is ramp etiquette. This is how you move an airplane on the ramp. This is how you park an airplane on the ramp. This is how you walk around other airplanes. I've seen it quite a bit. Somebody will start up, on the tie-down spot and just sit there. And then they do their run-up on the tie-down spot.
Oh.
And then, it's just all this stuff where they park, they'll swing around a park right in front of a door to the FBO. They'll start up right there and go full throttle, and then stuff goes everywhere, or they park next to another airplane and blast it with prop wash. I just don't think instructors take the time to teach students kind of the basics of ramp etiquette, how to move the airplane around on the ramp, be very cautious of where they're at. It's a safety thing too, There's not enough focus on the very basics of being around airplanes. So that's kind of my aviation pet peeve. And tail wheels do make you a better pilot.
Well placed.
Noted. We've done a few of these now, and I haven't heard that one yet, but man, now that you say it, I think you're absolutely onto something there. Because I've seen it myself at various airports. Not so much where I'm at, because we've got, it's just rows and rows of hangars, but some other airports I've gone to for, your $100 hamburger or a quick morning breakfast. And there's some people who just have no idea how to function around other aircraft.
They really don't. And it's not necessarily, a younger crowd. I've seen, maybe it's the older generation. They're like, I'll do whatever I want. Nobody's here. Nobody's here. I just think it's approaching it in a lackadaisical way. You're not even parking in the yellow, T spot on a tie down.
Oh,
If you're not going to tie it down, I was always taught, no matter what you're flying, be professional about it.
Yep.
Represent aviation, whether you're flying a 747 or a 152, treat it like it's your profession and that everybody's watching. That's kind of how I was taught. Do I do it perfect every time? No, but I try. And sometimes I just see people not even trying. They hop out of the airplane, and it's all parked whopper jawed, on the T, and then somebody can't get it next to them, and it's a small ramp, and then somebody's over in the grass, and it just doesn't make for a fun experience.
What, in your experience, is like the worst offender, not type of pilot? What action or lack of action has like the worst impact or bothers you the absolute most out of everything?
So a couple things. I think just in general, operating on the ramp, right? Don't waste a bunch of time. I know some airplanes you got to wait for certain things and all that, but don't start up in the tie down area and sit there for 15 minutes. Programming everything. Go to the pull off area and do all that. Taxi up. Do what you can. In the tie down area to get rolling. If there's a pull off area, go do it there. Kind of just expedite things. So
Okay.
Just ramp etiquette in general.
I like that. I can latch onto that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have my students do their pre-takeoff list in the run-up area.
Yeah.
They're all like, it's pre-takeoff. It's just before takeoff. I'm like, yeah, we'll be taking off after this. You can sit here and do it.
Yep. All right, Kyle, we appreciate you coming on and talking to us about what's going on with AOPA around the Midwest and Great Lakes region. It's been great having you, and we really look forward to bringing you back for the next episode where we talk more about you.
Well, more about me. I'm not that interesting, but I really appreciate the time. It's been great. Haven't done a podcast before, so this has been a good experience for me. I won't give up my day job to go into podcasting, but I think I do now need a fancy microphone.
You probably do.
But no, seriously, it's been a privilege to be able to communicate through you guys to our membership that might be listening. And I can't stress enough about the foundation, AOPA Foundation. And please remember that. And again, if anybody hearing this has any specific questions, legislative, airport advocacy, you can put up a link to my page on the AOPA website and be more than happy to chat with you. So
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so
you.
much. So we had a really great conversation with Kyle. I hope that you took away as much as we did from that conversation. He's a really great guy to talk with and very knowledgeable on all things going on with the AOPA. So hope that you enjoyed that.
Well, I know I speak for all of us when I say we are absolutely thrilled that we got to speak to him not once, but twice. So stay tuned for our next episode, which will also feature Kyle, and we get to talk to him a little bit more.
If you like the Flying Midwest podcast and would like to support us, you can jump on any of those platforms where you listen to the Flying Midwest podcast and leave us a rating or a review. That helps get our podcast out to other listeners, as well as sharing it with others.
You have friends, right? Go share it with your friends. Peer pressure.
Peer pressure them into listening to our podcast. Listen, have you listened yet? Have you listened yet? Maddie,
No.
have you listened yet? Maddie. Maddie.
Stop! I'm being peer pressured.
That was the idea. Now, you all do that with all of your friends. We'll have so many more listeners. So as we wrap up this episode, if you have any ideas for future episodes of the Flying Midwest podcast, or you or someone you know would like to be a guest, you can reach out to us on any of our social media or contact us at flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com.
Also buy our merch.
Who's going to say the thing?
Until next time.
See ya.
Yep.
See ya.
Chef 536, contact Minneapolis Center 132.35 today.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Flying Midwest podcast. Until next time, podcast service terminated, squawk VFR, frequency change approved. Good day.